A single video clip, barely a few seconds long, was enough to set the internet on fire. It showed two of the most photographed women in the world standing just a few feet apart, both smiling for the cameras, both dressed for a state occasion, and yet something in the air between them felt heavy. Within hours, that short clip had been watched millions of times. Body language experts were called in by major outlets to break it down, frame by frame. Royal commentators debated what it meant. And ordinary people around the world, who had never met either woman, found themselves asking the same question. What is really going on inside Buckingham Palace right now? This is the story of that moment and everything that led up to it, not rumor dressed up as fact. Not invented conversations behind closed doors. Just the real, documented, camera-caught reality of a royal family that has spent years trying to look united in public while insiders whisper about the tension simmering underneath. By the end of this story, you will understand why a single glance between a queen and a princess became one of the most talked-about royal moments of the year, and why the king himself is said to be growing tired of watching it play out. To understand the moment that made headlines, you first have to understand the three people at the center of it, and the decades of history that shaped how they see each other. King Charles III has spent most of his adult life waiting. He waited nearly 70 years to become king, watching his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, rule for over 7 decades while he prepared, quietly and sometimes painfully, for a role he was not sure he would ever get to hold. When he finally did become monarch in September 2022, following his mother's death, he inherited not just a crown, but a family full of fractures he had spent years trying to manage from the sidelines. Camilla became queen when her husband, King Charles III, ascended the throne in September 2022. For Charles, having Camilla finally recognized as queen consort was the end of a very long and very public battle for acceptance, one that had cost both of them years of criticism, tabloid cruelty, and public doubt. Yahoo! Camilla's road to the position she now holds was never smooth. Her relationship with the royal family has long been complicated, shaped by lingering resentment tied to her once-unaccepted affair with King Charles. For decades, she was cast by the press and by much of the public as the outsider who broke apart the fairy tale marriage between Charles and Princess Diana. It took years of patient, deliberate public relations work, slow reintroduction to royal life, and Charles's unwavering support for Camilla to move from the other woman to Duchess, and eventually to Queen. That history does not simply disappear because a title changes. People who have studied the royal family closely say Camilla remains, even now, acutely aware of how fragile public affection can be, and how quickly it can shift towards someone new. That someone new, for the better part of the last 15 years, has been Catherine, Princess of Wales. Kate Middleton entered royal life in 2011 as a commoner marrying into one of the most scrutinized families on earth, and from the very beginning the public's reaction to her was different from what Camilla had ever experienced. Kate was young, photogenic, and crucially untouched by scandal. Where Camilla had to fight for approval, Kate seemed to receive it almost automatically. Over the following decade, as she became Duchess of Cambridge and then Princess of Wales, Kate built a public image built around composure, warmth, and quiet competence. She rarely gave interviews, rarely made missteps in public, and became, by most measures, one of the most popular members of the royal family, arguably second only to the late Queen herself in terms of consistent public goodwill. That popularity is, according to multiple royal watchers, part of what has made the dynamic between Kate and Camilla so complicated. Insiders have described tension between Kate Middleton and Queen Camilla, with some branding it the Queen's jealousy over Catherine's glamorous looks, despite the two women being decades apart in age. Whether or not jealousy is the right word, and it is worth noting that this framing comes from anonymous sources speaking to tabloid outlets, not from any confirmed statement by either woman. The pattern of reporting has been consistent for years now. Camilla is frequently described, in body language analysis and insider reporting alike, as uneasy in moments where Kate draws significant public attention. One of the clearest, most talked about examples of this dynamic played out at a state visit in September 2025, when the royal family hosted President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump. During the visit, Prince William and Kate Middleton welcomed the German president and First Lady at the airport on a separate occasion, and escorted them to meet King Charles and Queen Camilla, taking their place to the side once the visiting dignitaries walked ahead. But it was the Trump state visit that produced the moment that would end up going viral. The tense moment between the two women was caught on video as Kate was seen speaking with First Lady Melania Trump. Camilla walked up and appeared to shoo the Princess of Wales away, before continuing her own conversation with Melania Trump. Yahoo! The clip spread quickly, and it did not take long for body language professionals to weigh in publicly. Social media users read conflict into the body language between the two women, and footage showed Camilla had been speaking with the First Lady when Kate walked up to join the conversation. According to analysis of the footage, the Queen could be seen looking away several times before appearing to beckon Kate to step back and leave her to speak with Melania Trump alone, after which the Princess of Wales turned and seemed to briefly consider joining her husband's conversation with the King and President Trump nearby, before stepping away entirely. Newsweek. It is worth pausing here to be clear about what is fact and what is interpretation. The video itself is real, and it has been widely viewed and discussed. What Camilla was thinking, what she intended by the gesture, and what Kate felt in that moment are not things anyone outside of that conversation can know for certain. Even outlets that covered the moment in detail acknowledged this limitation. Royal engagements can be high-pressure moments, and it is not possible to know for certain what was going through either woman's mind at the time. That honesty matters. This is not a story about certainty. It is a story about a pattern of public moments, expert observations, and insider reports that, taken together, paint a picture of two women navigating a relationship that is far more complicated than the polished photographs suggest. Newsweek. The reporting that followed the Trump visit only added more layers to that picture. According to accounts published in the days after the incident, the moment was not seen by everyone as harmless royal protocol. One source close to the situation described the incident as subtle, but said that Kate felt sidelined, noting that she has worked hard to position herself as the monarchy's future, and that being asked to step aside felt humiliating to her. The same reporting suggested that despite the awkwardness of the moment, Kate's overall presence at the event was seen as a success. Reports on Kate's performance at the event were largely positive, with claims that she completely outshone Camilla, a fact that reportedly did not go unnoticed among palace staff, some of whom were said to anticipate a difficult debrief afterward. Yahoo! This was not the only time cameras had captured an uneasy exchange between Camilla and Kate. A separate incident, reported roughly 2 months later during a state visit by the German president and his wife, produced its own moment of confusion. During that visit, once the president and First Lady arrived, Kate dropped into a curtsy for Camilla, which the Queen appeared to miss because she was occupied greeting the First Lady. Small moments like this one might seem insignificant on their own. But royal commentators who track these events closely say they add up, each one becoming another data point in a running public narrative about two women who are constantly being compared, whether they want to be or not. Yahoo! That narrative was fed further by a report from Us Weekly, cited in later coverage, which claimed a longer-running tension existed behind palace walls. The publication had previously reported on what it described as a secret, tense relationship between Kate and Camilla, additionally claiming that Camilla had been vocal in private about wanting Charles to remain king for as long as possible. That detail, if accurate, adds an important dimension to the story, because it suggests that whatever tension exists between Camilla and Kate is not simply about personality or public image. It may also be tied to something much bigger, the future of the monarchy itself, and who holds power within it, and for how long. Yahoo! That question, the future of the crown, sits at the very center of King Charles's world right now, and it is impossible to separate the tension between Camilla and Kate from the pressure Charles himself is under. Since becoming king, Charles has faced a stream of challenges that would test any leader. His own cancer diagnosis and treatment, Kate's parallel cancer diagnosis and recovery, ongoing fallout from his estranged relationship with Prince Harry, and the family scandal surrounding his brother Prince Andrew, which escalated significantly in early 2026. Royal watchers who study Charles's public appearances closely say the strain has been visible. In February 2026, following the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor on charges related to suspected misconduct in public office, Charles was observed at a public engagement just hours after the news broke. Body language expert Judy James whose commentary was cited by the Daily Mail, said she believed the king struggled after learning of his brother's arrest, identifying several signs that Charles was under visible stress during the appearance. James pointed to Charles adjusting the button of his overcoat as he arrived at a London Fashion Week event, describing the gesture as suggesting a desire to self-protect and self-comfort. Camilla, appearing separately at an engagement at Sinfonia Smith Square Hall around the same time, was also described as fidgeting, adjusting her coat's belt in what James called a mirrored version of Charles's own gesture. James explained that both rituals served no practical purpose, but implied a desire for self-protection and self-comfort. For royals who cannot simply greet the world with crossed or folded arms, these small, repeated actions are read as strong hints of inner anxiety. She added that Charles's lips were held in a rigid smile of resilience and stoicism as he was greeted by his host, but that his brows were puckered in what she described as a steeple of anxiety, with his eye expression suggesting sadness. This is a king, in other words, who is already carrying an enormous amount of visible strain, a brother in legal trouble, a health scare of his own, a fractured relationship with one son, and now, seemingly, an ongoing undercurrent of tension between his wife and his daughter-in-law playing out in front of the world's cameras. It is not hard to understand why some royal commentators have suggested that Charles wants the friction between Camilla and Kate resolved, quietly and quickly, before it becomes yet another headline he has to manage. Because Camilla and Kate are not the only complicated relationship inside the palace right now. Kate's own position within the family has grown more significant, and according to some reports more delicate because of her quiet efforts regarding Prince Harry. Since Harry and Meghan's departure from royal duties in 2020, the relationship between Harry and the rest of the family, particularly his father and brother, has remained strained, marked by public statements, a memoir, television interviews, and years of distance. But behind the scenes, Kate has reportedly tried to be one of the few bridges left standing. Kate Middleton and Queen Camilla are reportedly feuding, at least in part, over Prince Harry's tension with King Charles, after the Princess of Wales took what has been described as a surprising step to try to mend the long-standing rift between the two men. The tension is said to have intensified because of Kate's efforts behind the scenes to encourage dialogue between Harry, Charles, and Prince William. Those efforts appeared to bear some fruit later in the year. Harry briefly reunited with his father in September during a UK tour, sharing a private tea with him at Clarence House. Camilla was not present at that meeting, and palace insiders have claimed she was unimpressed by Kate's secret involvement in helping arrange it. AOL. If true, this detail reframes the entire dynamic between Camilla and Kate. It is no longer just about two women being compared in photographs or side-eyed in viral videos. It becomes a story about influence, about who gets to shape the direction of a fractured royal family, and who feels sidelined by decisions made without their input. According to reporting from December 2025, Camilla was described as openly expressing frustration toward Kate, who was said to be unwilling to fall in line with Camilla's expectations that she not interfere in family matters. That framing, Kate not falling in line, suggests a woman who has grown more confident in her own judgment, even when it puts her at odds with the Queen. The Royal Observer. It is a strange position for Kate to be in. For most of her time in the royal family, she was seen as the careful one, the woman who avoided controversy and stayed within the lines. But her health crisis in 2024 and the year of recovery and reflection that followed appears to have changed something in how she approaches her role. Those close to the family have suggested that surviving cancer gave Kate a new sense of clarity about what matters, including, apparently, standing by her convictions about her husband's estranged brother, even if it creates friction with the woman who now holds the title of queen. None of this happens in a vacuum either. Every one of these moments, the viral clip from the Trump state visit, the missed curtsy, the private tea at Clarence House, the reported frustration passed along through anonymous sources, plays out against the backdrop of a monarchy still trying to define itself under a new king, a new queen, and a new generation of working royals stepping into more prominent roles. Kate is not simply the Princess of Wales anymore. She is, in the eyes of many royal watchers, the most trusted face of the monarchy's future, arguably more trusted, in terms of raw public affection, than the king and queen themselves. That is not a comfortable position for anyone to occupy quietly. And it is an especially uncomfortable one for Camilla, who fought so hard and so long simply to be accepted, only to watch her daughter-in-law achieve widespread public goodwill in a fraction of the time. By the time the video from the state visit went viral, then, it was not really a story about one gesture, one shooing motion, one look away from the camera. It was the visible tip of years of quieter tension rooted in history, in public image, in family loyalty, and now, increasingly, in the very real question of how the House of Windsor moves forward from here. Charles, at the center of it all, is left trying to hold together a family that the public still largely believes is united, even as small cracks keep appearing in full view of the cameras. What happened next, in the weeks following that viral moment, would only deepen the questions being asked about Camilla, Kate, and the king caught in between them. The public wanted answers. So, reportedly, did Charles himself. Synthesized narrative elements and structured documentary framework. Synthesized narrative elements and structured documentary framework. By Yehen Part 3 High is Part Main Nea Factual Material Use Kia. Remembrance Sunday 2025 Kai reported details. Lip reader analysis, balcony protocol. Sab clearly attributed as reported interpreted. Koi invented dialogue Nahai. The next major test of the family's ability to project unity came in November 2025 at one of the most solemn fixtures on the royal calendar, the National Service of Remembrance at the Cenotaph in London. Every year, the royal family gathers to honor Britain's war dead, a ceremony steeped in tradition, military precision, and public expectation. It is, by design, one of the least performative events in the royal calendar, a moment meant for genuine national reflection rather than public relations. That made it, in its own way, an especially revealing setting for how Camilla and Kate would appear together, given everything that had already been reported about the tension between them. The 2025 ceremony carried extra significance. It marked 80 years since the end of the Second World War, drawing a larger-than-usual turnout, with 10,000 armed forces veterans taking part in the Royal British Legion's march past through Whitehall. King Charles, in his role as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, laid a wreath at the cenotaph alongside Prince William and Prince Edward, all three men in military dress. Above them, on the balcony of the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, stood the women of the family, Queen Camilla, Kate, Sophie the Duchess of Edinburgh, and other senior royals, watching the ceremony unfold below. The arrangement itself carried meaning that royal watchers were quick to point out. Queen Camilla's attendance meant Kate stepped back from the position of highest-ranking royal on the balcony, a spot she had occupied the previous year while Camilla recovered from a chest infection that kept her away from the 2024 ceremony entirely. This year, with Camilla back in her customary place, protocol shifted accordingly, a small, procedural reminder of where each woman currently stands in the royal hierarchy, regardless of how the public perceives their relative popularity. What followed, though, was not another moment of visible unease. Photographs and footage from the balcony showed Camilla and Kate standing close together throughout the ceremony, dressed in matching solemn black, both wearing the traditional red poppy pins that mark the royal family's observance of Remembrance season. At several points during the 2 minutes of silence and the wreath-laying that followed, the two women were seen sharing smiles with each other. At other moments, both appeared visibly moved, their expressions shifting to match the emotional weight of the ceremony below, a contrast that, according to outlets covering the event, humanized both women in a way that some of the earlier viral clips had not. One particular exchange between them drew significant attention in the days that followed, largely because of how it was interpreted by a professional lip reader consulted by the press. According to that analysis, Kate turned to Camilla partway through the ceremony, smiled, and appeared to ask a short question, something to the effect of noticing a detail on the ground below that had caught her attention. Camilla, according to the same lip-reading analysis, responded with what was described as a knowing smile before lifting her order of service to partially cover her mouth as she replied. Whatever the two women were reacting to on the ground was not visible to the public, and the moment passed quickly, with both women returning their attention to the ceremony within seconds. It is important to be precise about what this kind of reporting actually represents. Lip-reading analysis of royal footage has become a regular feature of tabloid coverage in recent years, but it is not an exact science, and even professional lip readers acknowledge that reconstructing full sentences from silent video is inherently uncertain, particularly at a distance and in profile. What can be said with more confidence is simply this. The two women were observed sharing what appeared to be a light, brief moment amid an otherwise formal and emotionally heavy occasion, and that moment was captured on camera and widely circulated. What made the exchange especially notable to royal commentators was its timing. It came just weeks after renewed reports of tension between Camilla and Kate, reports describing a queen frustrated by her daughter-in-law's independence, and a Princess of Wales said to be quietly navigating her own path regardless of Camilla's expectations. Seeing the two women appear at ease with each other, even sharing what looked like an inside joke, complicated the narrative that had been building throughout the autumn. Some outlets framed the Remembrance Sunday moment as evidence that reports of a rift had been overstated. Others suggested that even genuinely strained relationships can coexist with real, if occasional, warmth, particularly among people bound together by decades of shared public duty and family obligation, regardless of personal feelings. Separately, a different outlet reported a variation on the same exchange, describing Camilla as having muttered a single word, an exclamation of surprise, while shuffling her order of service and glancing toward the scene below, in what was interpreted as a spontaneous, unguarded reaction to something happening during the march past. Whether this was the same moment described by other lip readers or a distinct instance during the same ceremony remains unclear from the available reporting, and outlets covering the event did not fully reconcile the two accounts. What both versions agree on is the broader picture: two women, standing side by side through a long and demanding ceremony, sharing at least one unscripted moment of genuine reaction, however brief. This kind of ambiguity is, in many ways, the defining feature of how the public actually experiences royal relationships. There is no press conference where Camilla and Kate sit down and explain how they really feel about each other. There is no interview where either woman addresses the reports of tension directly. Instead, the public is left to piece together an understanding from fragments: a shooing gesture at one event, a shared smile at another, a barrier gesture with a handbag, a curtsy that goes unacknowledged, a lip-read exchange that may or may not have been accurately interpreted. Royal reporting, especially when it comes to interpersonal dynamics, is built almost entirely out of these fragments, stitched together into narratives that may capture something true about the underlying relationship, or may simply reflect the ordinary, unremarkable texture of two people going about a long and demanding shared duty. That tension between narrative and nuance became especially clear when a report published in mid-December 2025 returned to the theme of conflict between Camilla and Kate, seemingly undeterred by the warmth on display at the cenotaph just weeks earlier. According to that reporting, whatever goodwill had been visible on the balcony did not reflect a genuine resolution of the underlying friction. Insiders quoted in the piece claimed the situation between the two women had, if anything, worsened, describing Camilla as openly frustrated with Kate's refusal to defer to her wishes regarding involvement in family matters. A reference, once again, to Kate's continued efforts to encourage reconciliation between Harry and the rest of the family. This apparent contradiction, public warmth at Remembrance Sunday, continued reports of private frustration weeks later, is worth sitting with, because it says something important about how difficult it is to draw firm conclusions from royal reporting generally. Both things can be true at once. Two women can share a genuine, unscripted laugh during a solemn national ceremony and still hold real, unresolved tension over matters of family loyalty and influence. Royal life, like most family life, is rarely a single, consistent emotional state. It is a shifting mixture of duty, habit, formality, and occasional unguarded humanity, all layered over deeper disagreements that rarely get resolved cleanly, if they get resolved at all. For Kate herself, the months surrounding these events represented something of a broader return to public life, after a period defined by illness and recovery. Her cancer diagnosis in early 2024, followed by a lengthy course of treatment, had removed her from public duties for the better part of a year, during which Camilla had taken on a more prominent role in representing the family at high-profile engagements. Kate's gradual return to a fuller schedule throughout 2025 inevitably meant a recalibration of roles, a return to public spaces and events, where she had once been the automatic center of attention, but where Camilla, in the intervening months, had grown more comfortable and more visible in her own right as queen. That recalibration may well be one of the least discussed, but most significant factors underlying the reported tension between the two women. It is not simply a matter of personality or jealousy, as some tabloid coverage has framed it. It may also be a structural consequence of two women renegotiating their relative public roles after a year in which the balance between them had shifted, only for Kate's return to health to shift it back again. Camilla, having grown into a more prominent public position during Kate's absence, may understandably feel a degree of friction in stepping back into a supporting role relative to a Princess of Wales whose popularity has, if anything, grown since her illness, buoyed by public sympathy, admiration for her openness about her diagnosis, and the widespread relief at her recovery. Kate, for her part, has given no public indication that she experiences the relationship with Camilla as adversarial. Her public engagements throughout this period continue to focus on the causes she has championed for years: early childhood development, mental health, and increasingly, support for cancer patients and their families, informed directly by her own experience. She has not addressed questions about her relationship with Camilla in interviews, nor has she given any public signal that she views the reported tension as significant. This consistency is, in many ways, entirely in keeping with the approach she has taken throughout her time in the royal family, near total public silence on matters of internal family dynamics, regardless of how much speculation swirls around her. Camilla, too, has never addressed the reports directly. Her public statements and engagements throughout this period remained focused on her own long-standing causes, including her patronage of the Poppy Factory, the organization responsible for producing the poppies worn by the royal family each November, and for organizing the annual Field of Remembrance at Westminster Abbey, a role that placed her, fittingly, at the center of the very ceremony where she and Kate were seen sharing their widely discussed exchange. By the end of 2025, then, the picture available to the public remained genuinely mixed. There was no confirmed feud, no public falling out, no statement from either woman or from Buckingham Palace acknowledging tension of any kind. What existed instead was an accumulation of moments, some tense, some warm, most ambiguous, each interpreted and reinterpreted by outlets and body language experts eager to explain the relationship between two of the most photographed women in the world. For King Charles, watching all of this unfold from the center of his own mounting list of family crises, the lack of clarity may have been its own kind of relief. A relationship that remains genuinely ambiguous to the public is, in some ways, easier to manage than one defined by open conflict. As long as Camilla and Kate continued to appear together at major events, sharing at least occasional smiles, however brief or however analyzed, the institution could continue to project the unity it has always depended on, even if what lay beneath that unity remained, as it so often does within the royal family, genuinely unclear. What became apparent moving into the new year, however, was that the family's collective ability to absorb further strain was running low. Between the Andrew scandal reaching a legal crisis point, Harry's tentative and closely watched return, Charles's own visible signs of stress in his public appearances, and the ongoing, unresolved questions about Camilla and Kate's relationship, the palace found itself facing a level of scrutiny that even seasoned royal communications professionals struggled to manage. Every public appearance became an opportunity for further analysis. Every gesture, every glance, every seating arrangement was treated as a potential clue to what was really happening behind the family's carefully maintained public composure. It was against this backdrop that the events leading toward the next chapter of this story would unfold, a period in which the questions swirling around Camilla, Kate, and the king caught between them would move from the balcony and the state banquet hall into far more consequential territory, testing not just the family's ability to look united, but its ability to actually function as one. The new year did not bring the quiet the family may have hoped for. If anything, the first weeks of 2026 saw the reported tension between Camilla and Kate escalate into some of the most dramatic language yet used to describe their relationship, according to reporting published by OK Magazine in early January. Insiders close to the family described what they called open warfare between the Princess of Wales and the Queen, language far stronger than the earlier reports of frustration and awkwardness that had defined most of 2025's coverage. Sources told the outlet that the situation had become almost impossible to contain, with palace aides reportedly tracing the breakdown back to the state visit of President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump the previous year. AOL. That same reporting revisited the moment that had first put the relationship under public scrutiny, describing how royal watchers had claimed Camilla appeared to shoo Kate away during her conversation with the First Lady, though the outlet was careful to note that the claim was contested by others, even as it continued to fuel talk of a growing rift between the two women. This kind of caveat, buried within otherwise dramatic reporting, is worth paying attention to. It reflects an ongoing pattern throughout this entire story. Even the outlets most invested in reporting royal conflict frequently acknowledge, if only in passing, that the underlying evidence remains open to interpretation. What had changed by early 2026, however, was the surrounding context, which had grown considerably heavier. The fallout from the Prince Andrew scandal had reached a new and more severe stage. Andrew and his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, were stripped of their remaining royal titles and were reported to be preparing to vacate Royal Lodge, their longtime home on the Windsor estate. According to insiders cited in the same reporting, the toll of the Yorks' unraveling situation had weighed heavily on both Kate and Camilla, compounding whatever tension already existed between them. One source described the scandal as exhausting on every level, wearing down the entire family, Kate included, who had reportedly stood firmly alongside William throughout the crisis, drawn into an extended cycle of meetings and difficult conversations that stretched on for months. This detail matters because it complicates any simple narrative of two women locked in a straightforward personal rivalry. If accurate, it suggests that whatever friction exists between Camilla and Kate has been unfolding against the backdrop of a family in genuine crisis, one dealing simultaneously with a disgraced former prince, a fractured relationship with Harry, an ailing king, and the ordinary pressures of public life, all magnified by constant media scrutiny. Tension between two women navigating that kind of sustained institutional stress is, in some sense, unsurprising. Families under pressure do not always pull together neatly. Sometimes the strain finds its way into the relationships that are already carrying the most weight. At the same time, a separate controversy was brewing, one that had less to do with any single incident and more to do with the accumulating public narrative around Kate's future role. In early January 2026, The Times magazine, the glossy supplement inside one of Britain's most established newspapers, published a profile of Kate that explicitly framed her as Britain's future queen consort, describing her, through the words of unnamed friends, as ambitious, bold, and eager to deliver what the piece called impactful change once William eventually ascends to the throne. The piece drew immediate criticism, not for factual inaccuracy, but for its timing and framing. Daily Mail columnist Amanda Platel publicly questioned whether such coverage was premature, while Camilla continued to actively carry out her duties as the reigning queen, and asked whether those closest to Kate had done her any favors by speaking so freely to journalists about her future role. Newsweek's chief royal correspondent, covering the same controversy, reported that commentators had raised concerns the piece could be read as a slight against Camilla, an implicit suggestion, embedded in glossy magazine language, that the current queen was already something of a placeholder, with the real story belonging to the woman who would eventually take her place. This episode illustrates something important about the structural nature of the tension between Camilla and Kate, something that goes beyond any single gesture, glance, or reported comment. Kate occupies an unusual position within the modern monarchy. She is not yet queen, but she is widely discussed, covered, and marketed as though she effectively already occupies that symbolic role in the public imagination. Every profile that celebrates her future as queen consort, every magazine spread that treats her current life as a preview of what is to come, implicitly diminishes the significance of the woman who currently holds the title. Camilla did not need to say a single word for this dynamic to create friction. The friction is, in some sense, built into the structure of the situation itself. That structural tension has apparently existed for far longer than any of the more recent viral moments suggest. A book published in 2026 by author Christopher Anderson focused on Kate's rise within the royal family, offered a historical account that traced skepticism about Kate all the way back to before her marriage to William. According to Anderson's reporting, Camilla had once doubted that Kate was suited to marry a future king at all, viewing her, in the author's words, as too common for the role. Anderson quoted royal reporter Richard Kay, a longtime friend of the late Princess Diana, as observing that members of the royal family simply cannot stand being upstaged. A dynamic Anderson suggested played out repeatedly as Kate's romance with William captured public attention, that Charles and Camilla, in the author's account, needed for themselves during a delicate period in their own path toward public acceptance. Anderson's account also included a detail that offers a more hopeful counterpoint to an otherwise tense historical picture. According to the author, Camilla's feelings toward Kate reportedly softened significantly after Kate's cancer diagnosis became public in 2024, a shift Anderson linked to Charles's own cancer diagnosis around the same period. Facing serious illness within the family, Anderson suggested, had changed something in how Camilla related to her daughter-in-law, a reminder that even relationships shaped by years of quiet resentment or rivalry are not necessarily fixed and can shift under the weight of shared hardship. It is worth noting that this account comes from a single author's book, drawing on unnamed sources and second-hand characterizations, and has not been confirmed by the palace or by either woman directly. But it offers useful context for understanding how a relationship with genuinely complicated roots might also contain real moments of change and even warmth, alongside its more publicized tensions. Kate's own trajectory throughout this period suggests a woman increasingly focused less on any rivalry with Camilla and more on her evolving role alongside William as he prepares for an eventual future as king. According to reporting from December 2025, Kate had privately pledged her full support for William as he readies himself for what allies described as a far-reaching overhaul of the monarchy once he eventually takes the throne. A transformation insiders suggested could begin as early as 2026, depending on the trajectory of King Charles's health. One source close to the couple described the past year as having strengthened their bond in a way few had expected, given everything the family had endured, from Kate's own cancer diagnosis and recovery to the ongoing strain of Charles's continued treatment following his diagnosis in February 2024. This context reframes the entire story in an important way. If Kate's primary focus, behind closed doors, is on preparing for a future role alongside William rather than on any rivalry with Camilla, then much of the tension attributed to her by tabloid sources may reflect less about personal animosity and more about the simple, structural reality of a monarchy in transition. Kate is, by virtually every account, positioning herself for a future that has not yet arrived, while Camilla continues to fully occupy a present role that carries real formal authority and responsibility. Two women can be entirely reasonable, entirely dedicated to their duties, and still find themselves in a relationship shaped by an inherently uncomfortable structural reality. One is the queen of today, the other is very publicly discussed as the queen of tomorrow. Formal recognition of Camilla's own position, meanwhile, has followed its own long, and at times, contested path. When Charles and Camilla were crowned in May 2023, considerable attention was paid to whether Camilla would be titled queen or queen consort, a distinction with real symbolic weight, given decades of public debate about how much formal recognition Camilla deserved after her complicated history with the family. The coronation edition of the Bible used in the ceremony ultimately referred to her simply as queen, confirming the title she continues to hold today. That confirmation, arriving after so many years of uncertainty about her place within the institution, makes the current dynamic with Kate all the more layered. A queen who fought for decades to be fully accepted, now navigating a relationship with a daughter-in-law whose public acceptance arrived, by comparison, almost immediately. As 2026 progressed, the family did make visible efforts to project unity through shared public engagements. In March, King Charles, Queen Camilla, Prince William, and Kate attended the Commonwealth Day service together at Westminster Abbey, one of the more prominent joint appearances of the year. Photographs from a separate formal welcome that same month, at the royal dais in Windsor, showed Camilla and Kate sharing a warm greeting, an image that stood in visible contrast to the tension described in reporting from just months earlier. Spring 2026 also brought a formal expansion of William and Kate's institutional roles, as they stepped into positions as grantors of royal warrants, a responsibility previously held solely by Charles and Camilla, giving the Prince and Princess of Wales new formal authority to endorse companies and products supplying the royal household, a small but symbolically significant expansion of their standing within the institution. Not every public moment continued to reinforce a picture of togetherness, however. William, Kate, and their 3 children were absent from the royal family's traditional Easter service at St. George's Chapel in April, choosing instead to spend the holiday privately at their Norfolk home, marking the second time in 3 years they had skipped the gathering, following a similar absence in 2024 that came just a week after Kate's cancer diagnosis was first announced. These choices, while unremarkable on their own, were read by some royal watchers as part of a broader pattern. William and Kate increasingly prioritizing their own family's privacy and stability over full participation in every traditional royal gathering. A pattern some suggested reflected the toll of the previous 2 years, and others suggested simply reflected a young family's evolving relationship with royal tradition. By the middle of 2026, then, the story of Camilla, Kate, and Charles had not resolved into anything close to a clean conclusion. There was no dramatic public reconciliation, no confirmed rift, no official statement addressing any of the reporting that had circulated for the better part of 2 years. What existed instead was a long, accumulated record of ambiguous, heavily interpreted public moments. A shooing gesture at a state visit, a missed curtsy, a shared laugh at the cenotaph, a magazine profile that ruffled feathers, a historical account of old doubts softened by shared illness, and a family working, engagement by engagement, to project the unity that has always been central to how the monarchy sustains public support. What can be said with confidence, based on the full public record, is this: Camilla and Kate occupy an inherently complicated position relative to each other, shaped by history, by structure, and by the intense public fascination that surrounds both of them. Camilla spent decades fighting for a level of acceptance that Kate received almost immediately, a disparity that would create friction in almost any family, royal or otherwise. Kate, in turn, has navigated her own extraordinarily public life, including a serious illness fought out largely in view of the world, while being increasingly framed, publicly and prematurely by some accounts, as the face of the monarchy's future, a framing that inevitably complicates her present relationship with the woman who currently holds the crown. King Charles, throughout all of it, has remained the figure trying to hold the wider structure together, managing his brother's disgrace, his estranged son's fragile return, his own health, and the quieter, harder-to-name tension between his wife and his daughter-in-law, all while presenting, engagement after engagement, the image of a stable, functioning family that the institution depends on. Whether he has succeeded in resolving any of it privately is not something the public record can confirm. What the record does show is a king who has, by every visible account, continued showing up, hours after his brother's arrest, in the middle of his own health struggles at ceremony after ceremony, trying, in whatever way the institution allows, to hold it all together. The story of that single viral clip from a state visit, then, was never really about one gesture between 2 women. It became a lens through which the public examined something much larger: the slow, uneven, often uncomfortable process of a centuries-old institution trying to modernize itself, manage its scandals, prepare its next generation, and remain relevant to a public that increasingly demands transparency from an institution built, for most of its history, on discretion and silence. Camilla and Kate, whatever they privately think of each other, remain 2 of the most visible symbols of that process. One representing the monarchy's difficult, hard-won present, the other representing its uncertain, closely watched future. And King Charles, caught between them, remains exactly where he has been for most of his reign, trying to hold a family and an institution together in public, while the real answers, if they exist at all, stay exactly where they have always been, behind palace doors, out of view of the cameras, known only to the people who were actually in the room.